instead of good morning. You know, for me, it's always, hey, y'all. I want to thank everyone for being here this morning to our Black History Month Spotlight program. And I am so pleased that in our audience are early college high school students. Early college high school students, I want to give you some props, so I need you to stand up. On behalf of Dr. Mary Thornley, our president of Trident Technical College, we welcome you, our visitors, friends from the community, and we are so pleased that you're here. Before we get into the program, I have a few people I do need to thank for getting everything ready for today. First of all, I want to thank the committee that put this program together and start off with the Assistant Dean of Palmer Campus, Dr. Amy Huda. Lady and my administrative coordinator, Regina Smart. She's trying to hide from you. Professor Donald West. Gregory Cushing, who's working hard at the front counter. Marlena Husser. Mark Fielding, Dr. Susan Williams, Valerie, did I see Valerie? Yes, our wonderful librarian, and Noel Blaney, who gets us out there with marketing. Thank you all so very much. The theme for this year for Black History Month is African Americans in times of war, but we decided to focus on an African American who, if you don't know, by the end of the presentation by Dr. Whitehurst today, you're going to be so amazed about Robert Smalls. The 2018 theme, African Americans in Times of War, commemorates the centennial of the end of the First World War in 1918. It also explores the complex and implications of an international struggle after the war was over. The First World War was initially termed by many as the Great War, the end to all end of wars, and the war to make the world safe for democracy. However, those very concepts provide a broad, useful framework for focusing on the roles of African Americans in every American war, from the Revolutionary era to that of the present war against terrorism. Times of war inevitably provide the framework for many stories related to African American soldiers and sailors, veterans, and civilians. This is a theme that is filled with paradoxes of valor and defeat, of civil rights opportunities and setbacks, of struggles abroad and at home, of artistic creativity and repression, and of catastrophic loss of life and the righteous hope for peace. Our story today that is focused on Robert Smalls will give you a great story of his life that focused on conflict, but it also focused on peace. And that peace was the peace of freedom. for him and his family. We're excited today to share his story with you, and we hope that it is of interest, that you can tell it over and over again. Every time I heard Dr. Whitehurst tell us her story about Robert Smalls, I was telling everybody the things that I heard her say, because there were some things I did not know. So, buckle up, it's going to be great. I'm going to turn it over now to Linda. Linda, you got your nerves together for me, my dear. Linda is going to be our mistress of ceremonies for us today, and she's going to be telling us our program agenda and walk us through. But before, I forgot somebody. My little brother, where are you? Oh, Randy. Randy Grimes is my little brother. Did everybody know that? You know that, right? Because little brothers don't tell big sisters no. And I said, Randy, I need you to bring an intern down here. Oh, and here's your sidekick. Stand up, guys. And my cameraman here. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Thank you, Society of Broadcasters, and thank you, Randy. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I also wanted to recognize all of my other colleagues in the audience. Colleagues from Trident Technical College, come on, stand up. You can do it. You can do it, Charlotta. Thank you guys for being here. And now I'll turn it over to Linda. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Linda Schaefer, and I have the honor of studying here in the Associate of Arts program at Trident Technical College. Please, everyone stand and join in as we welcome the Early College High School as they lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance and sing the National Flag Anthem.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring with the harmony of liberty.
much. That was beautiful. Now please join me and give a warm welcome to Alexis Pinckney as she comes to introduce our guest speaker for this great occasion. Dr. Whitehurst is a retired Coast Guard Reserve commander. She was a Coast Guard Seaman Apprentice Yeoman Reservist while a student at Chestnut Hill College. After completing the BS in biology, she earned her Coast Guard commission and served as a port safety and environmental protection officer in several Gulf Coast ports. She was assigned to the crew of the United States sailing ship USCG Bark Eagle as part of her tour of duty at the Coast Guard Academy. She held reserve military readiness positions in Baltimore, Maryland, Washington, D.C., New Haven, Connecticut, and Charleston, South Carolina. Dr. Whitehurst earned a Master of Science degree from George Mason University, Master of Public Health degree from Yale University, and the Doctor of Philosophy from the Medical University of South Carolina. She is an instructor in biological sciences at Trident Technical College. Please welcome Dr. Whitehurst.
Thank you, Alexis, and thank you to the chorus. Wasn't that wonderful? Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I am honored today because I get to tell you about one incident in the life of Robert Smalls. This is a story of a remarkable American, and it would require numerous sessions to go over all of his contribution to our national history. But I'm pleased today to talk to you about the events of one night. These are the events leading up to the evening of May the 12th, the morning of May the 13th, 1862. So we're going back in time. This is the war between the states. I have to tell you about the remarkable courage of a 23-year-old man. And his accomplishments during the Civil War were completely extraordinary and courageous. And this story captures my attention because when I was a 23-year-old kid, I was a Coast Guard officer and I was in charge of port safety and what you would now call Homeland Security in Mobile, Alabama, and several Gulf Coast ports. So the idea of harbor operations and what goes on is something that I'm quite familiar with. And the knowledge that Robert Smalls was able to do what he did, which was to take a Confederate ship of war and deliver it to the blockading Union vessels, is astonishing to me because he couldn't read. When I was that 23-year-old Coast Guard officer, I had allies, I had teachers, I had every radio that we had back in the 70s. I had communication and command and control to get the big picture of what is going on in a harbor. He couldn't read. They wouldn't let him learn to read. And he was able to pull this off. So this is what attracts me to this amazing story. And this is the account of Robert Smalls. We see him pictured here today. And he exhibits extraordinary leadership because he executes his plan to take that vessel. That vessel there, that's the Planter. And it's a personal watercraft. It is under the control of Confederate General Beauregard, who is in charge of the Confederate defenses in this area, in Charleston in particular, and his second in command, General Roswell Ripley. So this ship is what was taken by Robert Smalls and his allies, his shipmates, who were also enslaved Americans, and given to the blockading Union vessels. They delivered this to the USS Onward, which was under the command of Lieutenant Nickerson, and then the Planter and everything aboard it, which was a serious armament and weapons, was given to the Union. So here's a brief summary of Robert Small's biography to this point. At the age of 12 or 13, the various references differ on this, he is sent to Charleston from where he was enslaved in Beaufort to live alone. He's hired out, and he has to work several jobs. He is a 12-year-old young man, and he gets up in the morning and he turns off the gas lights and cleans all of the glass for the next day from the lights in downtown Charleston. Then he goes to work at what is now the Dock Street Theater. It was a restaurant, and he's a servant there all day. And his job in the evening is to return back to those lights, which he has to relight for the next evening. And so that is his daily effort. And for this, his compensation, his paycheck is going to his slave master, Mr. McKee, who is in Beaufort. Robert gets very little, minimal compensation for doing this, and he saves all the little bit of cash that he is allowed to keep. So he is excelling at these activities, and when he gets a little bit older and stronger, he even gets hired on the waterfront, and he is trained in the crafts of being a stevedore, anything to do with rigging on a merchant ship, and wheelman and piloting in the coastal waters. And he excels at this to the extent that he is sent to the Planter. The Planter is that Confederate ship that I mentioned. Aboard Planter, he is called a wheelman because he's actually functioning as the navigator and the pilot, but back then, an enslaved man would not be given the title of pilot. So he's just called a wheelman, and he is doing seamanship work aboard the Planter. So I want to consider this Planter here. This is a vessel that is very important to the Confederates for the defense of this harbor. It has the perfect draft for the harbor activities. It is 46 feet abeam wide. It is 150 feet long, and it has a very shallow draft. It's just drawing 4 feet of water. And that means it can travel anywhere in this low country area, in and out of any wharf that it needs to get to without any problem, which makes it a superior vessel for the Confederates. General Beauregard and General Ripley are using it to move troops and guns and armament from the various forts that they have, because they're defending Charleston very well. The Union is not going to take the port of Charleston. It will be abandoned in a few years. But it is so well defended by all the defenses that were put in place by the Confederates that it was a fortress. The whole harbor is a fortress. And Robert Smalls is called upon as a crewman aboard Planter to be involved in the construction of forts. There are the forts that you're aware of, Morris Island, Fort Sumter, but there are smaller forts that are being constructed on middle ground in the harbor. And one of these is Fort Ripley. And at the moment of this story, the Planter is engaged in supplies for Fort Ripley. This Planter is a very large vessel. You could put 1,400 bales of cotton on the deck, or you could put 1,000 men on the deck. So this is a very important vessel. It's also a gunboat. It's armed. It has a 32-pound howitzer forward on a pivot, so it can be aimed at whatever it has to shoot at. And it is used in warfare in this area and also down in the Savannah direction. It has a complement of 3 white officers and 8 enslaved crewmen. Robert Smalls is the pilot, although, as I said, he didn't have that title. He's known as one of the best pilots on the whole South Carolina coast, and it is said that he can navigate with his eyes closed, and he probably could. So he knows every shoal, every hazard to navigation, and he would also know the placement of every torpedo. That is a Confederate torpedo that's been recreated there. And if you look at that, the word torpedo, I'm used to hearing that in the context of a weapon that is discharged from a submarine. But this is earlier in naval warfare. This is called a torpedo, but we would now call it a landmine. And if you look at that, it's constructed of a wooden barrel. It is filled with explosives. There is a contact switch there. The two ends are made of tin, and they are shaped such that when this is anchored to the bottom of the water and held with chains, it will keep station and stay where it is put. And the intention of the Confederates is to keep the Union from coming into this harbor and taking it. So they are blocking different channels with weapons of this type. Now this has to be precisely placed, and just like today the Coast Guard precisely places buoys in our navigable waters, this has to be precisely placed, which is no small trick to do the piloting and seamanship required to get this thing on station. They give this task to Robert Smalls. Later, when he takes the planter out to the Union, he also takes even more valuable information, which is the location of every torpedo that he ever placed. So he knows how the harbor is defended because he designed it, he executed it. So the planter is tasked with moving these torpedoes in the channel, and that's our harbor, and they also put them in the Edisto River and in the Stono River, because the Stono is considered a backdoor. If the Union wants to attack Charleston, they might be able to sneak around the Stono River and get up here and do that. So this vessel, as you can tell, is really important to the Confederates with all the activities that it is conducting. At this time, the Union is blockading Charleston. Charleston is one of 3 ports that have railroad connections to the interior of the Confederacy and a seaport. So it's